Hey everybody, welcome to the Black Cat Lounge. I am your most congenial host. Who else would be here on a Tuesday night? Come on, people would have no lives. I'm here. That's why I'm here tonight. I'm Tim Shaw, and we've got a great show for you tonight. I can't wait. Hello, Candace, my friend Candace. I see her up in Michigan. I see her up in the Michigan Paracon over here. And Candace, I miss you, kid. And hopefully this year everything will go well and we'll all get together. And I got to tell everybody, and Debbie Emerson is in. Hi, Debbie. How are you? I got to tell everybody that my friend, hey, Ariana, my friend, Carrie Hall, who is part of Chris Chiesla just called me the tank, and there's really good reason for it. And Jason Marble's in the room. Carrie Hall has created a little group, and it's so cool. And it's something that people don't do. Hi, Amy from Hull House. What we do is it's called the Paranormal Postcard Club. And wherever we go, we try to go, hey, Aida. We try to go and we try to get a postcard and everybody signs it and send it to different members. And they were in Missouri, I believe, at the World War I Museum, which is really cool. And that's a postcard that she sent to me. I always like to share these things. This is the back, of course. Whoops, there's Carrie's signature stamp. And all the gang that went up there with her. And they made me jealous because our guest tonight and I were just talking about how we don't get a chance to see any of our friends anymore. Hey, Rick, how are you? Paul, how are you from down in Gettysburg? Good to see you, man. Frank Krupka. I got to tell you something. Frank Krupka is like this great big muscle guy. And between you and me, he goes and he cooks better than me. I don't want to even go into it. But anyway, he's learning. He comes over to my house and I'm showing him a few things. Hi, Melanie. Hi, Rebecca. And well, anyway, it's been a quiet week here in the Black Cat Lounge, which is actually really welcomed. And it's really a lot of fun to actually sit here and actually work on things. Just to let you guys know, for the haunted objects, I actually had to go and buy another small cabinet so I can house some more stuff in it. And I need one more set of bookcases. And I'm going to be honest with you, there will be no room in my basement for anything more. I don't know what I'm going to do with this stuff. It's piling up. And the best part about everything, people just keep sending it. Now I know how Johnny Zaffis feels, I think every day that I go to the mailbox is an adventure, and I kind of like that. Hey, Ron. Hey, Christy. Hey, Danielle. How are you? Mandy. And my beautiful wife, Nancy, is in the room too. So you know what? I've got so much to talk about. And I want to preface this before I bring our guest on tonight. I miss seeing this dude. It's like a bromance. I'll just come right out and say it's a bromance. I miss seeing him. He's up in Canada, so we can't cross borders, the international borders. He's literally an hour's drive away from me, and it so sucks. And I love getting up there and hanging out with him. And I go to his place that we call the Hut, and it's the Niagara Voodoo Shrine, and it's an amazing collection of stuff that he has. And every time I think that I have a lot of stuff, I go back and I look at a couple photographs of his place. I've got nothing compared to him. And that's what's so great about it. Hey, Nick, how are you? So anyway, let me just go and have a little introduction for him. Our guest tonight is an international voodoo practitioner. And I'm just going to come right out and say I've learned so much from him. He's influenced me in a lot of things. He's actually helped me out. And we're going to talk about what we did to sell a house. It was just an amazing thing. This is the cat where I got the information from. He is a reader. Now, psychic reader, you know what? I hate to say psychic reader because he's more than that. He throws the bones, man. He reads the bones. He understands it. he's more than a psychic reader, more than a medium. He really is. There's a lot more to him. He's an author, and he has written this fantastic book. And again, you know what? I don't like to go and hawk books that I don't really like. He has authored Conjuring Harriet, Mama Moses Tubman, and the Spirits of the Underground Railroad. It's this right here. I urge anybody who is interested in both folklore, voodoo folklore, the Underground Railroad. This is the book for you. It's got everything that you want in there. I learned so much from that book. He's a sought after international speaker. He really is. And he's fresh from the heels of WitchCon, which we both kind of appeared at. WitchCon is usually held in New Orleans, but this year, because of COVID, we did it over the internet. And this is the guy that recommended me. So I've got to, next time I see him, I got to give him a dollar, but it's got to be a US dollar. He doesn't want Canadian money. He lives in Canada. He only wants US money. So okay, it's a deal. And I got to tell you what, I want everybody after this show to go on YouTube and look up the Dragon Ritual Drummers. I want everybody to go on there and look them up. I want you to listen to him because he's the leader. He's the leader of the band, baby. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And I first heard him play at a Yule at Babeville here in Buffalo, New York, several years ago, and he blew me away. Just blew me away by it. He even got me, the guy with like steel knees that don't want to bend. He even got me to dance to that damn stuff. And he's the guy that influenced me into drumming. And this guy's a master. He's a master percussionist, and I couldn't. I couldn't carry a beat in the basket, babies. So let me bring on my good friend, Witchdoctor Utu. Hey, what's up, brother? What's up? It's so good to see you, man. I got to tell you what, it's like we get together and it's like, oh my God, there's not enough time when we're face to face. Now it's like over a year since we've seen each other. This is like crazy.
Because given the chance, we might have you drumming with the Dragon Ritual Drummers soon enough, because we always can use an American on that side to help make border issues a little easier. So we might be calling upon you soon.
That sounds good. Because wait a minute, I can do this.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how we can incorporate someone into the troupe.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Just give me one of those. Give me one of the drums that has like the terry cloth top, so that I can't make noise, but my hands move. It'll make me look great. Thank you. This is what I love about you, Utu. You always think about me. You always think about me. Now, it was so funny when my buddy Chuck is on, and Chuck is a great drummer. This is Chuck likes to go. He's the one that gets me to go out to the beaches and stuff.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
He got me addicted to it. So damn it. We got to get him to drum with you, because I think you would love it. You would love it. But anyway, when I announced that you were going to come on today, first off, I'm so happy to say I didn't get not one hate email, not one hate message. I'm going to tell you what, see, my friends love you. And I pay them well to love you. This is what I mean. It was so good, and I did get some questions.
Okay, great.
That they wanted to ask. Some know you, some don't know you, and the whole idea is I want to introduce you to my audience, because back in the day when you were on the old Black Cat Lounge, people just loved you. Well, now there's a whole different generation out there that really want to go and see what the amazing Utu is all about. So first off, the first question that came in, and I got my official Utu pad here with official questions. So because I won't remember, I'm at that age. Would you tell everybody, like, how can I describe it? Because you were born in Scotland. You're this tall Scottish guy that is like, and a lot of people and you've gotten flack for it. You know what I'm talking about. A lot of people are like, wow, how did he ever get involved in both drumming and the whole religion of voodoo? Could you tell everybody about that?
Sure. Well, I don't really get a lot of flack from anybody in the religions, first and foremost. So, the people that are part of the African traditional religions, and I've been part of these interconnected traditions for, almost 20 years, and I belong to a few of them. That's never where the issue comes from. The issues of my involvement is very recent, and it's from predominantly white social justice types. So let's just be that, make sure we call that as it is. But how I got into this religion is, I was already immersed in the pagan and witchcraft community, from the 90s. I'm old guy, right? So the 90s. But because I was born in Scotland and my father's very traditional, and I was raised, when I would spend time with him, he was a drummer in a Scottish marching band. And so that's kind of the culture there, is the kids are, we're put in the regalia. We learned to drum. Like for me, I started playing a triangle and then cymbal and sometimes carrying a banner, but you make your way up to percussion. And so, I grew up a musician. I was already a musician in my 20s, very much enthralled with the drum. The tribal drum world music scene was, sort of taking root in the 90s. And I was really interested in it and kind of exposed to that culture a little bit. And so it was really mostly my drumming, the fact that I already had some understanding of magic, but it really was just an accident of just the level of drumming that I could provide, that I ran into people that were part of Santeria and part of another line in Voodoo. That back then, no internet yet. We're talking about year 1999, year 2000. Well, at least anyone I knew had the internet. And so people still used phone, Rolodex, things of this nature. And at that time, there were places that required proficient drummers. And I had a few cats that I was drumming with at the time. And we all had the correct drums, the ability to play the rhythms. And so got invited to provide the service, so that was how I got into that world, was just drumming for the ceremonies, learning the rhythms. And then that just begot more invitations to other places for other traditions, other clergy. And it just kept, it was something that I always thought, what, this is good enough for me. I really enjoy the idea of what the drum is it's a foundation in Voodoo, to sort of hold the foundation of what takes place and where all the attendees and the adherents are dancing and attending to this ritual. But then as time goes on, it just became more about, we would like to have you drum on the inside of some of these ceremonies now. And that's how eventually I got initiated. And around at the same time, though, I had ran into Priestess Miriam Chamani of the Voodoo Spiritual Temple in New Orleans, who's such an inclusive woman, and Priest Louis Martinet. And they had already been, going at it in New Orleans for the temple for well over 10 years at that point. And so I've been a member of the Voodoo Spiritual Temple for, 21 years now. And so that's another place that just, because of her inclusivity and the type of work that she promotes around the world, my gauntlet of, making sure I could arrive at various states when she used to travel a lot more, go down to New Orleans as much as I could, spend time, help, do renovations in the temple, mop, clean floors, things like that. That's part of it all. And that's just how it was for me. And, I just became enveloped into the religion, eventually climbed some ranks as far as what, the lineage is, and just represented the temples and the traditions and the lines that I belong to. And that's how I ended up in there. There's always going to be people of different colors, different ethnicities from different parts of the world that will be immersed in the African traditional religions. And to specifically, define them, because I belong to a line that comes out of the Ifa in the Yoruba region of Nigeria. It's very different. That the religion of Ifa in Yoruba land is quite different, to be honest, than it is in the African traditional religions in the New World, which were mostly housed in the Caribbean. And so the Caribbean culture, despite the fact there's enslavement at its pinnacle, for its time, it still had the fact that the way they ran their colonies, the way the enslavers did, the indentured servitude population intermingled with the enslaved almost immediately. And so there's been a cosmopolitan aspect to what those religions are, whether it's in Cuba, Puerto Rico, Haiti, Trinidad, Tobago, these, and to some degree, parts of South America, Brazil, Venezuela. these were always where the people that were either descendants of the colonizers, or the enslaved, or the Native American population, or someone in between there. This is what these cultures were about. And so that's the what I think is lost in some parts of America right now, or it seems to be. And it was not something that was not known not that long ago, but it seems in this last, I don't know, 7 years, there's this new crop of individuals online who seem to want to put people in places based on their ethnicity. And I don't we want to get into that entirely, but that's really alarming on many levels to me. That opens up a lot of dangerous elements of it's almost fascism, to be quite honest. It's kind of strange. So,
Yes.
Recently that there's been some sort of flack to people that look like me being immersed in these religions, when really in many ways it's been that way for decades and decades, and in some cases, especially in the Caribbean cultures, it's been hundreds of years. And but that's how I ended up in there. But for me, instead of just because I'm so public, because of the Dragon Ritual Drummers and the platform we had earned and the places we travel, we get flown around the continent for a while now. For me, my work became more about trying to work on something different, and mostly because I respected the traditions I belong to, and I didn't want to be that white guy that, has got the African name. Utu's not an African name, by the way, but there was one that was bestowed to me, but I don't use it. And I didn't want to be that person that just kept promoting these religions like our religions like other people did. So for me, it was more interesting to, just fate would have it that I live right at the end of the Underground Railroad. I live right at the end of it, and friends of mine are descendants of freedom seekers, and that run the 2 houses of prayer here in town. And that became more for me the interesting part of connecting what the Underground Railroad represented and its unique inclusivity. The connecting Canada, the United States, worked. It was operated, the Underground Railroad, by people that were white, black, rich, poor, men, women, equally at the time, multiple religions, and even atheists, all working together in this clandestine way to fight tyranny, to fight the narrative of slavery. And that's, to me, a unique point in North American history where there's something in the 1800s that represented that sort of progressive fight against the system. And I would never have really discovered that if it wasn't for Priestess Miriam at the Voodoo Spiritual Temple and members there that, when I was kind of like younger and I wanted to learn more about New Orleans voodoo, when I wasn't there, it was them that suggested, why don't you dig a little bit into the voodoo of Niagara? And, I was like, what voodoo of Niagara? What are you talking about? And they said, the Underground Railroad. Isn't that where Harriet Tubman was? And I did know the church was right around the corner. I was aware of it. But again, I'm going back almost 20 years where there wasn't even a book yet that really connected these elements. And so it didn't take much time till I realized, well, there is a unique mystery here. And then for me, it just became the sort of open, transparent thing I shared everywhere I went, on all social media with the Dragon Ritual Drummers, that we would continue to sort of promote, elevate, educate on what the Underground Railroad was. I started to be on my own pastimes and traveling around the various trails, going backwards from here at the end. And that became what I wanted to focus my work on, was demonstrating that there was a unique spirit world that nobody was focusing on, that encompassed white, black, man, woman, Canadian, American, that fought together, that made vows and have bonds that connected into the afterlife. And that's fascinating to me. These are spirits and historical figures who were already elevated. Statuary is built of them, properties named after them. Their graves are visited quite often. Offerings are left at their graves by all manner of segments of society. So this was like an untapped place that were freedom fighters, a tapestry of many colors and religions. And to me, that represented a great place to focus on for any spiritual worker. These are heroes. These are people that upheld a level that we should be inspired by, and we should revere and exalt them. And so that's just kind of what I was doing for many, 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 many years. Many, clergy of Umbanda, Haitian Vodou, Palo Mayombe, Ifa, whether it's African or the Kumi here in the New World, all the clergy of these traditions are friends of mine. And they all were slightly enamored with the idea too, and were always giving me advice and giving me blessings and making things for me, divining for me, and generally interested, and said, yeah, this is really unique, something different. And so that was what I was doing. And really, it was just because I was in New Orleans at Hexfest that the head acquisitions for Wiser, she came up and asked me if I'd ever thought about writing a book about it. And I said, well, I don't know, kind of. And next thing you know, a couple of years later, I had a contract signed with them and I managed to put out that book. And there it is. So that's how I ended up. It was mostly through drumming. The fact that I had some prior magical training by the time I ended up in African traditional religions, but it was mostly because of the music. And music to me, and as I study America, as a foreigner, still kind of, in many ways, music has always been the place that has been the bridge between, the segregated societies of America: white, black, rich, poor. It's the musicians, whether it goes all the way back to jazz, the birth of jazz, or rhythm and blues, or rock and roll, whatever was birthed out of, the African American community. It's eventually going to be white musicians that interacted with them, collaborated with them, and then in many regards, brought it mainstream. So, this interplay is always fascinating to me. And when there was segregation in America still, in the 1900s, musicians were the ones that ultimately were always sort of breaking those barriers, playing together, advocating for each other, collaborating. And so that's really what's interesting. So I ended up in this world solely because of music.
Now, we talk about different traditions. Now, people don't realize, and I mean, yourself, people are always shocked when you say, well, there's different styles of voodoo, different traditions. They never get. Do you feel that the media has really done a disservice to the religion because of the fact that the religion is a unifying factor of social equality, and they're just like they see it, and it becomes, in the Judeo-Christian mind, it becomes work of the devil. And do you feel that there's so much more to do at this point, at this juncture, before you can even go and say, well, people will accept our religion as what it is?
Yeah, I mean, not that long ago, we've got to remember all movies that were revolved around witchcraft were really negative. And I think after a good 20-something years of, mainstream, Wicca, so, being able to entrench yourself into elements of Hollywood's machine, it has changed a bit. Voodoo, but voodoo is much more complicated, because when I say voodoo, I'm referring to just one line of one type of religion, one word to intonate it. And I always feel sorry. I of course, as a person who teaches this, travels as much as I do, I'm always going to daily encounter people who are going to be wanting to learn more. And I always remember when I was that person, when I first was drumming for some of these traditions, that it was a daunting gauntlet to learn the difference between Santeria, which is Lakumi, the difference between that and Palo Mayombe, Haitian Voodoo, New Orleans Voodoo, the actual Ifa coming out of Yoruba land, Nigeria. Like, these are all vastly different. There's some similarities, even Ubanda and Candomblé coming out of Brazil. It is very, very imposing to some people to try to figure out what this is all about. And there's not much you can do about that, because none of these things were really meant to be unleashed upon into the mainstream of America. And that's what's happened in the last, let's say, about 10
correct. Yeah,
years. It's now
absolutely.
It's poured into America, and it's always been there, of course, but it's elements of parts of America that never knew it was there. And that's even in the black neighborhoods, black culture and community as well. These religions come from Caribbean cultures. They were housed within Puerto Rican, Cuban, Haitian communities, not American. And that's the difference too, is in America, it's hoodoo and root work and conjure that was the American, sort of, demonstration of them holding on to it. Because like you said, these religions all absolutely straight up are clinging to Mother Africa's, for the people that were enslaved and brought over, them clinging to these their practices, their ancestral ways, their religions. The enslavers weren't dumb. They split these people up into different, because they were getting their, forget, a lot of people don't realize that in West Africa, where a majority of the slaves were brought from, there's 100 different languages spoke there, several different cultures. And it's not even in Nigeria, there's several languages spoke, one country. So they split people up. It's hard for them to communicate. It's the best way to subjugate people. And so that's what it was. It was originally them clinging to their religion, clinging to their ancestral ways. And within very little time, it became, for those who were surviving and were actually going to continue to live under these conditions in the New World, which were deplorable, of course, it became now having to be necessary to understand the ethnobotany of the region. That's what the Native American First Nations element comes in, is because, well, who else better to know what plants you can eat, what you can use for medicine, what's the magical qualities, because these are animists we're talking about, people that were animistic. And that goes the same for animal mysteries, animal totemic powers. These were things that had to be enveloped. And then it was still the African who gleaned over what some of the elements of folk magic, the occult that was available to some of the, to be watched by those who were the slavers, and that was enveloped as well. And so that's still the foundations of these religions, and they were utilized quite often for empowerment and uprising against the colonizers, uprising against the enslavers. And so at its root, it is about survival. It is about empowerment for those who are being subjugated by their enemies. Now that, of course, as time changed, there was people that, again, like I said, indentured servitude, poor, free people of color entering into the fray, and the religion in the Caribbean was again, like I said, multicultural or cosmopolitan, I should say. But in America, other than Louisiana, it was the Protestants that ruled. It was different under the Catholic colony.
Mm-hmm.
It was different. It was a different system, and the religion is different. It has all these saints and all these, angels that you can sort of like, synchronize elements with. Whereas in America, under the Protestant system, which was much stricter, there wasn't communities other than Louisiana, the same as it was in the Caribbean and South America, where there was entire communities were sort of able to have a bit more of an ability to express themselves with drumming, dancing, singing. This wasn't the case in America, and that's what hoodoo, root work, and conjure was. It became now a solitary practice, one individual who understood how to make certain medicines, certain magical pouches, things to carry, mojos, gree-gree, juju, and it became more solitary, more one individual sharing that. And unlike the cosmopolitan Caribbean, hoodoo and root work was not shared with the white people of America. That was maintained within the African American community, and because to this day America is still very segregated, so it wasn't very hard. And it wasn't until about, again, World War II that it sort of it seeped out into America because of the Great Migration, because of about several million Black Americans leaving the South and coming up to live in St. Louis, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo. That's when it started to permeate into more of a mainstream culture. And so, but hoodoo and root work and conjure was much more an American expression of the African traditional religion, very different, practiced very differently, much more internal. And so that's the difference. And so it is really hard for some people to want to figure out what it is that they want to, what they're attracted to. It's tough. A lot of people, I always ask too, well, what is it about it that you're interested in? I think it seems exotic to a lot of people. I know at one point, I guess it seemed that way to me, but it was still, for me, was the attraction, was the music. And so it is hard. It's hard for folks to be able to determine what's the difference between these religions, why they're attracted to them, what it is that they're, and then ultimately that's why my book was just one little pebble to drop to just remind people that it's lost a lot. Right now, when you read a lot of books about root work, hoodoo, and conjure, I never identify as a hoodoo practitioner. It's just nothing I've ever done. Some people label me that, but I'm not. But all the books that are written, and again, written by white people, they tend to just gloss over the hard reality of where these practices come from. So that's, for me, that's why I wanted to really emphasize in my book with the Underground Railroad Mysteries, is to remind people that if you are going to enter into these traditions, these religions, hopefully in some way that you're, being invited in, or at least collaborating with somebody who is knowledgeable in it, then I wanted to focus on the reality of where these practices come from, because so many of them are just whitewashed and glossed over for something romantic, like this sort of story you hear that in Southern conjure, there's this sort of narrative that, a Black person, a Native American person, and a European person sat at the same table and created hoodoo, and everybody's got access to it. And that's just not true. That's utter fantasy. It was the African American in the Southern United States that created that system. It eventually permeated, but they created it. And so that's just fact. And so it's really hard to sort of help people out in that degree. It takes a lot of perseverance, a lot of patience. Nothing comes easy. But if someone's truly interested in it, then hopefully, they know what tradition is they're interested in, because some of these are not just magical practices, they're cultural religions. And so, as you know, you've met
Exactly.
people at the Botanica El Indio. These are a Puerto Rican population immersed in Cuban Santeria. Like this is a lifelong commitment to a religion, so it's sometimes it's not what people think, to be quite honest.
No, it's not. No, it's not at all. And I got to just let you know that our good friend Stephen Innermill from the Buckland Museum, the curator of the Raymond Buckland Museum in Cleveland, Ohio, he said, let Utu know that I've been reading his Harriet Tubman book. Very educational. It's in stock at the Buckland Museum gift shop, just to let everybody know that.
Oh, right on.
That, I think that's fantastic. Of course, I mean, you know me, I go and I try to go and I hawk your books everywhere I go whenever anybody ever sees it. Let's take a quick break, 30-second break to pay some bills, and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Black Cat Lounge. I'm Tim Shaw, and my guest today is the amazing Witch Doctor Utu. We'll be back in just a couple seconds. The Black Cat Lounge is brought to you by Paranormal Oddities, the little store with the big heart. Patronus Photographic, fine art, photography, and design. Nancy's Sewing Room, aprons, masks, and handmade purses. And Wild Raven, hand-poured candles for those magical times. And we're back. As Tim Shaw, you're listening to the Black Cat Lounge, and my guest tonight is the amazing, the effervescent, iridescent, the man with great hair. What can I tell you? Anybody that's got hair has got great hair. The amazing Witch Doctor Utu. Hey, Utu, how you doing? Welcome back. Thank you so much for being on tonight. You hit upon a really big concept. People don't realize. See, when people think about voodoo or hoodoo, they think about it as a single entity. Whereas because of the fact that in the Judeo-Christian traditions, and again, the Protestant traditions, there is no such thing as evolution. There is no such thing as cultural assimilation. There is no such thing as, we took a little bit from column A and mixed it with column B and we got C. There is none of that. It is absolutism when it comes to a lot of the Protestant religions. And unfortunately, that's just the way a lot of people think. It's either white or black. There is no gray area. And that's one thing after meeting you and so many of, your friends, I was able to understand just how many influences there are. And also in my own religion, spiritualism, we all know that there's so many different cultural ways that are spiritualist, and people again, you have to open up your eyes. The other thing is people don't realize the reason why it was hidden, because and it was masked by so many. And a lot of people don't get the whole idea of why certain voodoo deities are masked. They're using Christian names, like Saint Barbara and things of that nature. But you have to understand, this is a religion of the downtrodden. This, again, like you said, they held on tight to those beliefs, and they were forcibly assimilated into a white culture where people don't realize that Native Americans and so many of the African American tribes, South American tribes, they were force-fed this religion into their being. So how else could they keep those folk ways alive, their religions alive, but to go and hide them and keep them under the ground? And I think that's where a lot of people don't get it. And when, I have people that come up and say, hey, do you think if I go and visit Utu, he'll teach me voodoo? I think the problem is that they don't want to know about voodoo. They want to know about spells. They want to be able to go and take some of the actions of voodoo, but they don't want to do the history. And that's what kind of always pisses me off about it, is they don't see. That's why they're so myopic. They just want one part of it. And as you know how I am, I kind of have to immerse myself into anything that I'm interested in to understand it, to get a better understanding. And sometimes, yourself, my little pea brain screws up and it doesn't see the obvious. But guys like you kind of push me back in the right path, and it's like, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden it all comes together. And I think that's the biggest problem. I think people want the sensationalism without having to do the historic work.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? That is actually the case even for the religions of, witchcraft and the many others under the pagan banner. It's the same thing. People want the seemingly fast track to sorcery and powerful spells. And so, yeah, what are you going to do about that? It's the way. I mean, not that long ago, you had to go through a gauntlet, even in traditional witchcraft, pre-internet, which isn't that long ago. You had to follow through a gauntlet and meet people and gain trust and go through your training. And now it's like everybody just wants to circumnavigate these things. And so there's not much we can do about that, except just stay true to what we know and what we teach. And so for me, that's why the Underground Railroad to me is the most valuable paradigm to share for people in any magical tradition. And because of what it is, and because it crosses over and was the true cross pollination of African and European mysteries meeting in America, as opposed to in the Caribbean under the Catholic ways. So as you know, as a spiritualist, that's the unique thing about spiritualism is it is a cross pollination. The radical Shakers who were the ones experimenting with communicating with the afterlife, which was considered taboo, of course, in the early 1800s. Well, they were the ones also that had a unique living situation. So whether it was parts of Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, they lived communally. They had multiple steads on a large tracts of land, which meant their properties were kind of impenetrable. And they were good people. So they were housing freedom seekers who were escaping slavery. And once they got through some of the most horrendous parts of it, which, coming from Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, which was literally many times nonstop being chased, by the time they got up into the north and the northeast, this was the time. And the area that you live in, and where you were born, and these unique spots of the Northeast around the Great Lakes, was a place where the freedom seeker could actually spend a week being nurtured, being fed, reclothed, rest. And because of the way that the Shaker cult was experimenting with afterlife, this is where in Barnes, at these very tables, that the African American way of interacting with the spirit world interconnected and formulas were shared. And that's why even what's so unique is in spiritualism, when it really took root, it was like identified as being a place of abolitionism. Like all the radical abolitionists, even if they were atheists, they gravitated towards where the spiritualists, seances and ceremonies were happening, all throughout the Northeast, because it was a stronghold of it. And so that's what's unique to me. And the fact that aspect of what spiritualism is, kind of becomes enveloped by Kardec spiritism, and that somehow makes its way back into South America, into the Caribbean, as spiritismo, which is spiritualism in Espanol. And now that's one of the most attractive elements in the Caribbean culture is the spiritismo. And so it's come full circle. And that's unique to me, that actual cross-pollination, that birthing of these two traditions combining to make something happened on the Underground Railroad. So that's a true American meld, much like, elements of what rhythm and blues or jazz or rock and roll is. It's a combination of things that's uniquely American. And so that's special to me. And so the Underground Railroad for me, no matter what tradition you're in, as a magical practitioner, as a spiritual person, there's heroes within that pantheon, from Harriet Tubman to Frederick Douglass to John Brown. The names go on that we know about, the people whose names we know, that are worthy of veneration. And they were all mystics. They all kind of changed religions throughout their whole lives. They, and even if they weren't, that's the unique thing. John Brown, being such a hardcore Seventh-day Adventist, interacted with Mary Ellen Pleasant, who was a legitimate voodoo woman.
Right.
He spent time with Harriet Tubman, who was interchanged a lot between being a Methodist and a Baptist, and spent time with Frederick Douglass, who was an atheist. These people all, right now, can you imagine trying to take some of those denominations and put them in a room and tell them to cooperate?
No way.
Impossible. So the fact that these people worked like they did is inspirational. That's what you look at and say, how did they do this and fight the system and do so with, spiritual mana surrounding them. That's what's special and unique to me. And so, people that want to learn voodoo, I know what it is. I understand the allure of it. It seems mysterious, but I'll tell you, a lot of people that are the black practitioners in my life always try to say to people, there ain't no extra magical mysticism going on here. It's a system.
Yep.
But you can practice any form of magic and it'll be effective for you. There's no secret thing going on over here or, any of these places. It's all the same. Magic is magic. Sorcery is sorcery. Formula is formula. But, if people have patience, and that's hard to come by these days in a lot of people, but if they have patience, and they have someone that they actually can trust and can spend some time under tutelage with, then they will be able to interact with these religions and traditions. And then I think they'll find that like this, Tim, like a lot of people forget too, traditional witchcraft, much like spiritualism, much like voodoo, if you're doing it right, it's meant to be actually helping transform and heal yourself first and foremost.
Right.
It's not about circumnavigating hard work and just getting to power and spells. It's about self-reflection, self-improvement, making yourself to be in the position to help other people without the tyrannical ego that is so easy to be enamored with, right?
Big time.
So
big time.
It's hard work. It's hard work in all traditions. You're meant to be self-improving.
People don't realize, that's something, again, that's always pissed me off, because all of a sudden now what I'm seeing is different traditions, and especially like healing traditions. I'll just go with Reiki as a Reiki. I went and I took Reiki 1, and then the where I got the symbols to use, Reiki 2. I did that like my first year. Then it's got to set into you. It's almost like it's setting into your DNA. And you practice. And then you go on. And then you work up to it. Now, people are like, okay, I went 1 through master in a weekend.
Right.
And then they're not just hanging out their shingle, but they're teaching it.
Right.
It's like, what's wrong? I mean, there's no self-reflection. None whatsoever. That just drives me insane. There's no actual, what happens if, there's so much to it. Just because you can wave a magic wand doesn't mean that the magic is going to work. People don't get that. And in order to do this work properly, as well as I do, that there's pain and there's suffering that has to go with it in order for it to sit in the back of your brain and allow you to work. And spirit is not going to work with you. I don't care what tradition it is. Spirit is not going to work with you if you're not willing to put that time into it. And I think that's my biggest bitch. And and again, people come up. It's hysterical. I've this year I've probably got 2 or 3 messages going, "Hey, can you hook me up with Utu? I really want to learn this or want to learn that." And it's like, dude, you're missing the whole point of what you're doing. They're not understanding that what's a ritual. Ritual is a stylized prayer in any tradition. What's a stylized prayer? It is a focused intent. What makes the focused intent work? You do. You working with your deities, your gods, your traditions, and that are deep set in your heart, in your soul. And that's where they're missing it, and that just drives me insane. But
so true. So true. And the funny thing is I don't really, I'm mostly identified in the public sphere, I guess, in mostly dragon ritual drummers, not as much now, but when it comes to the voodoo aspect of me, people absolutely identify my connection to the Voodoo Spiritual Temple in New Orleans because I promote it so much, because it's a public temple. Right. Miriam's work is global. It's public. So, I do my job to help promote it, elevate it, do all the hard, dirty work when I have to, and when I can, I'm always happy to do it. So I don't really promote a lot about the other traditions I belong to. Now, my title, Witch Doctor, comes from another entirely part of Africa that's like, I'm got nothing to do with voodoo whatsoever. That's a totally different tradition of removing nefarious witchcraft that people may feel like they have. And so, I was lucky. I stumble into a lot of things, but it was because of my makeup of where I was that I ended up with these people that were essentially from Mozambique. And so I don't really promote that much. So I'm like, I do my part to, support the temples I belong to, the teachers I serve, and I sort of leave it at that. My work publicly has always been Underground Railroad because it's not something that anyone has any sort of license over. It's inclusive when it was in an existence, and it's got a lesson to learn now. And so,
Mhm.
that's why some of the clergy that may not always just have the best outlook on me or whatever. Because don't get me wrong, the whole voodoo world and African traditional world is just as filled with drama and fakes and charlatans as every spiritual tradition.
Yep.
It's out of
Oh,
control right
yes.
now, to be honest. Crazy things.
You,
But
you just said a mouthful there, Utu, because of the fact it's like, people are like, oh, well, this and that. And I look at them, I say, what turnip truck did you just fall off of? This is the hatred, the jealousy has always been there.
yeah,
It's up to us to go and transcend any of that stuff because the work is more important than the organization or the the networking or whatever you want. The work is what has to be first, not the crap, not all that other stuff,
that's
not the
right.
drama. Who's oh, well, if you preach at this church, you can never preach at this church. And it's like, what? Well, you know what? I won't preach at any church,
Yeah. That's for me. Like, so my whole point is just to always, because I get around a lot, because I do a lot of public facilitation, it's more to just get each individual to sort of hopefully be in touch with their personal magic, where they're from. And then, to point them in the direction of the least amount of resistance and drama. To me, that is the history of the Americas. To look at it from a different view, that there were some heroes that worked together to fight the system. Especially nowadays, it seems to be quite a coming back to that sort of work. So, with patience, with perseverance, I certainly do teach people, but it's like every good teacher, and I know that you have a gauntlet, Tim. Like because I know it. It takes a long time. You're gonna have to try to get a person. You're gonna convince them many times before you're gonna be like, okay, all right, well, we'll work together. But it's always just everybody just needs to be able to have some place to go, feel safe, feel like empowered. And so, to me, it's the public facilitation that helps with that, and that's how our worlds collided many moons ago, and
Yeah,
that's the circle we run in. Being at places where we are open, transparent, public. And if people can get a taste of what we're about, maybe they go home and understand a bit more, come back to another thing. And then eventually, you can build a relationship with somebody and determine yourself if that person is trustworthy, if that person is honorable, integral, because that's the most important thing. Make sure that the person that you're learning from has got some honor, integrity, and you can trust them not to take advantage of you.
exactly.
That's
Because yourself, you've come into the same I without mentioning names, you've come into the same situation that I have. It's almost as if it becomes they want a cult. They want this following. And I think the best teachers are people like us because we don't, and I shouldn't say us, you, because nobody wants followers. You know what we want? We want to teach people. We want people, we want to spark that divine spark within them, that flame that's within them, that they want to be able to go and become better people and know themselves and to help other people and get out there and serve spirit or whatever. But we don't want these followers. And we have to be so careful because there are a lot of people that are lost out there in the world that are looking to be led, to be told what to do. And especially here in the United States, we're just coming out of I won't go into my politics, but we're coming out of this era where people want to like listen to pablum fed stupidity, and they want you to go and say it's the truth, and that is ridiculous. It's a suspension of common sense. It's a suspension of free will. It's a suspension of being able to be a human being, an individual, and that to me is where we're missing so much. And again, it's also the fault of, and I won't say organized religion, but it's also the fault of mainstream religion, who are followers, who, because no longer do they want to be leaders in spirituality to open up the minds of their congregates or whatever. They want to make sure that their organizations last. That's all they care about. That that they don't lock and shutter the church tomorrow. Well, you know what? If that church sucks and is going out there and spreading bullshit, I say burn the damn thing down, because spirituality has no place in that, and believe me, Utu, I've told you, I remember sitting around the fire with you the one day saying, listen, I'm not really liked in a couple of those spiritualist churches, but I'm outspoken with it, and that's what bothers me more than anything else. And I think that's with the study. And I think you're a big part of like why I'm that way. Because I see now, once I started talking to you and once I started learning from you and once I started going and doing some independent studies, I realized that no one has the key to the lockbox on total spirituality. At that point, you introduced me to the Botanica del Indio, and I learned so much from Luis. He's a great person, and if anybody ever gets into Buffalo, New York, stop at the Botanica del Indio on Niagara Street. You won't regret it. It is a phenomenal place. But I learned so much from him, and it colored what I was thinking. And I got to tell you what, from the time I first met you at that Yule thing that I was dancing crazily like a wild man to now, I mean, I can see the evolution in my own spirit, my own belief system. And I got to thank you for that, because I mean, that opened my eyes to so much.
Well, you're definitely the giver of compliments, and I appreciate that. But one of the things just to reiterate, I remember one night when you were up here at the Conjure Camp, I told you that in my life, at the time I had now been in multiple workings with you and then seance with you and saw you for a whole weekend. This was a long time ago. It's like, I had five people in the world I'd met that were true mystics and honorable people. And I said, I've now moved on to hand number 2 because you're number 6.
Wow, that's high praise.
I told you that night, and you were like, okay, and I meant it.
Wait a minute, I gotta wait a minute. Where's my wallet? I'm gonna have to send you. Do you take PayPal for that one?
So you represent when it comes to your tradition, your religion. And until you see someone really perform the ceremony like you do, that's when it's ultimately it hits. And so I appreciate the kind words you're saying, but it's and that's what I think is awesome, to be around a good fraternity of workers, because we all are going to learn from each other, and what I've learned from you is immeasurable. And so the feeling's right back at you, brother. Like it's you're just very kind is all. And but
it makes, but you know what I mean, it's so true, because of the fact we get a chance to go. And this is what I think so many people are having a big problem with, is that they want to learn, but they don't know where to go. And I'm always like, well, it doesn't matter where you go. Just keep your eyes open and take the good stuff, take what's good, make it intrinsic, and then walk out, walk away. That's all. There's no shame in it. Who wrote the Bible for you? Who wrote that book? You wrote the book. You're in charge of your own life. And I think that's a lot of what I learned from the tradition of voodoo, the tradition of hoodoo, over so many other traditions, because I think what I've seen, and again, with the spiritualist background that they don't teach you about all the South American and really Kardec, depending which organization you belong to, because we don't want to open up our students' minds properly. I think being able to do that, I was able to go and really get a better flavor for what the world around us should be. And there's no shame in it. And I mean, I have spiritualist friends that'll come into my house and go, wait a minute, what's that altar there? What's that? Isn't that pagan? Well, yeah. Wait a minute. Why do you have an effigy of Santa Muerte? Why do you have Papa Canella? Why do you have Marie Laveau? Why do you have this? I also have Jesus, Joseph. I have Mary. I have all sorts of different entities and deities on my altars. And it's like, why do you have that? Well, because these are all inspirations for me. And I wouldn't have gotten that unless I started going and studying more of the different traditions. And again, it was hard for me because being, hey, I'm a Scotch Irish guy, I mean, I'm whiter. Look at you now. You look like you got a tan. Me, I'm as white as a ghost here. And it's hard for me to go. And even though I've studied the American Civil War so long, and John Brown was, a huge part of it, which they downplay, unfortunately. It was hard for me at first to open my eyes to see what's going on. It's even like all the Confederate monuments and everything that have to go down. And yourself in Voodoo's in Congo Square in New Orleans, they had gone and they changed that under the Jim Crow law, Jim Crow era. They made it into Beauregard Park, after P.T. Beauregard, the Confederate general, and they removed it. And it's hard for me to go, and it was hard for me to go and conceptualize why they were doing it. And then with the study of voodoo, I understood what was going on. Yes, get rid of it. Let's go back to why it was called Congo Park. Why it was a place where it was a gathering for the downtrodden and for the slave masses, and to go there and reconnect to their own religion and their own music. It was so important. But people don't get that. And even now I have trouble trying to explain that to so many of my historically enlightened friends that studied the American Civil War.
It's just that another era in life where there's, a reevaluating of where we are. And again, I don't think that I try to tell people sometimes if they're like, well, first off, find out where they're from. And I always say, well, where you're from, there's going to be a tradition of magic, cult, folk magic, folk healing, incorporate that a little bit. It'll help empower the blood within you. It'll help waken that up a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with exploring different traditions, especially when we live in this part of the world, which is a giant intermingling of traditions.
I agree.
And in fact, the occult has always been that. So it's ultimately best these days, hey, if you're going to go full on in and devote yourself to a religion or tradition, that's great. But make sure it's also one that gives you the freedom to still explore of the many vast options that are out there to see what fits and feels right. And try to think of the whole work about me is always get a person to be very autonomous. Let them be autonomous in their own life. Be responsible for opening their own roads.
Exactly.
Be responsible for, their own self-maintenance of their fates. And at some point, you may find somebody that you're going to want to help in that. And that's great. But in the meantime, just, it's good to learn lots of things and try to think about how you individually can become your own clergy of your own path. And
exactly. You've got to, you hit the nail right on the head, Utu. You hit the nail right on the head. And, and again, I just got to think that about John Brown. And it was so funny because John Brown, if you follow the history, man, if you go with the abolitionist side, he was Captain Brown. He was a man of conviction. If you go with the more northern side, he was a madman. If you go with the Southern plantation thought process, he was not only a madman, but he was a traitor and a murderer. So you have to go out there and you have to study for yourself and you make your own decision. But the idea is to get out there and think, learn how to think, go out there and test the waters. Do not go and just take everything for granted. Again, I don't want to go back into the pablum fed whatever the last few years that we've had here in the US. It's just that I surround myself with people who think. I surround myself with people who test my brain, but I also go and I surround myself with people who'll call my ass out if I screw up, and that's what we all need, because you don't learn unless you screw up. You don't learn by everybody coddling you. And it's a tough thing. And again, by looking, and I remember when I went up and I was in the Adirondacks in Lake Placid, and I went up to John Brown's farm and I saw the graves. I visited his grave and those of the other ones that were killed at Harper's Ferry. And I've been to Harper's Ferry many, many times on the real spot, not where they moved the firehouse. I've been inside there and touched those bricks to see what I could feel from there, And to me, yeah, he was a madman, but he was also a man of conviction, and he was far ahead of his time. And that's something that, again, I got for myself, but people are missing that. People are missing that. Hey, Utu, it's 8:00. Oh my God, I don't want to keep you all night. Especially, you did your hair. You might have something to do tonight. You know what I mean? I don't know. So
No, I wake up, it looks like this. It's
yeah.
easy.
See this? This is how I wake up, and it looks like this. Hey, I want to flash a couple pictures up there real quick before I let you go. And because I always like to go and share different things. Now, this is the Dragon Ritual Drummers, and I want everybody to go and really, I want you to go on YouTube and search them out. They have some of the greatest music that I've ever heard. I love them, and I have all their CDs, and I go and I'm every so often I'll just play it, and I try to play along with them, but I know better. It doesn't work. It just
full warning. If anyone's going to look up Dragon Ritual Drummers on YouTube, just don't judge. I got to take them down. We have some of our travel videos from years ago when reality TV was nipping at our heels, and they were like post things. And so every once in a while, I watch some of those travel videos, and I kind of cringe. But yeah, there's a couple of musical ones on there.
Go for musical ones. Yes, I've watched those other ones, and I'm going, okay. Now listen, being in reality TV, I wasn't that far away from some of your videos, especially early on. we won't talk about the Sheraton Hotel in Philadelphia on the production company's dollar, on their dime at the bar. So we won't talk about that someday. But here's another. And again, when we're talking about when we're mixing our different traditions, here's Utu with Laurie Cobbett and Christian Day. Was that up in Salem?
Yeah, that was at Laurie Cabot's annual Witches Ball. So we're lucky. The Dragon Ritual Drummers play for the official Salem Witches Ball that Christian runs through Festival of the Dead, and then usually the next night we play the more intimate Laurie Cabot Historic Witches Ball, Halloween Ball, which is always amazing. So yeah, that was just one night I managed to get in there. It's like, hey, can I get a shot? Because they're so amazing.
Both of them are. I really love them, and I think the world of Christian now. I mean, really, I didn't know him that well. Now I get a chance to know him a little bit. Well, here's one of my favorite pictures. Hey, look at those guys. That was pre-COVID.
Oh, wow.
That's when the two of us were. That was in Niagara Falls, I think, and we were doing an event up in Niagara Falls, Canada. So we had fun with that one. That was one of my favorite ones. And of course, I'm going to put it up there again. If you guys want to read a great book, I highly recommend it. Conjuring Harriet Mama Moses Tubman. It is a phenomenal book. You'll learn a lot. It's got a great combination of both history and tradition. And it's really I can't say enough about it. So, Utu, stay on the line for just a few minutes so I can thank you properly. And I'm going to go and say my goodbye to everybody. And I can't thank you enough for being on there, man. Thanks
so much, brother. It was so good to see you and talk to you. Right on.
Much love. I'm all happy now. I'm happy. I don't know what to even say. It just makes me happy to see you, man. Okay, I'll be back in a couple, brother. And that's my good friend Utu. I mean, he's a great guy, and I've known him for a few years, and I can't say enough about him. I really can't. I learned so much from him. And if you guys get a chance to ever see the Dragon Ritual Drummers play, they are mind-blowing. They're just mind-blowing. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here on this Tuesday night, because why? I have the best guests in the world on. That's why. And you guys come to see me, and I just want to go, and I just want to send an evening prayer to, dear, Mother, Father, God, you who are known by 1,000 other names. Heal those who are afflicted. Heal those who are sick. Mend the broken minds that are out there. Those people who are just not feeling right. The coming of the sun is here. The days are longer. Hope will reign supreme. I do that in love and light. My friends, thank you, everybody, for being where else at the Black Cat Lounge, where the elite meet next to the transfer station. We'll see you next week, Tuesday. Ciao, babies.